We wouldn't have an automobile industry or a financial industry where we thought that innovation or wealth are in, conflict with safety. That is on us to figure out how do we learn with these machines to use them creatively and not to just kind of sit back and let them do everything for us. Play with this stuff, be creative with this stuff, use it as, a kind of a paintbrush, a way to brainstorm, a way to kind of express yourself.
You said, I read online about you, that you were pushing for a trustworthy AI. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it means a bunch of different things, but at the core, it means that we have agency in a world of AI and that the systems we build are under our control, whether that's individually or as a society, and that there's accountability. So if something goes wrong with those systems, we know who to go after. And so, the EU AI Act, for example, really does well on that accountability piece for high-risk uses of AI. So we'd like to see more of that. But we also want to see companies, including our own, design systems that really optimize for human awareness, human control of how these AI systems work for us.
And do you think that's reality right now? Are we close to that?
Well, I think we're in a cat and mouse game on both aspects of being trustworthy. So we are building, sort of more ability to understand the chain of thought of an AI, how did it get to this conclusion? But these systems are very opaque and we don't really understand how they work. And certainly we haven't designed, say, like the ease of use we have in an iPhone as a way to understand, this is how I make this AI go in a direction that I want it to go. So I think it's getting better, it's getting worse, and as we use these things more, we're going to have to push harder for us to be in control.
You just mentioned the EU's AI Act. Do you think that is the way to go to, put in place certain rules that you're not allowed to do AIs that might be dangerous?
AI and even the internet are pretty new. And anytime you have something new, like you think about the automobile, it takes societies decades to figure out how to regulate them well. So I would say the AI Act is like one first small component of us figuring out how to make this whole new phenomena safe. I think we're going to need a lot more industrial policy to help our economies build on these things, and not just the economies of the US and China, but Canada and Germany. I think we're going to need all kinds of different regulations that are about competition. And so, yes, the AI Act is one piece of this, but it's a new phenomenon. We need to really dig down and learn how to regulate in new ways and invest as governments in new ways.
But do you think that we're actually heading towards more regulation right now worldwide? Looking at what's happened in the US, Donald Trump re-elected, very close to Elon Musk. So what's your take on this?
Unfortunately, I think the idea of balancing regulation and innovation, which really need to go hand in hand, like we wouldn't have an automobile industry or a financial industry where we thought that innovation or wealth are in conflict with safety or having controls. We see those things as going together. And I do worry we're going into a world that is unfettered innovation without that balance built in. And you do see a lot of countries, including the US, putting the brakes on the kind of balance that we need, that is innovation and safety coming together.
So when you look at the AI market, it used to look like you needed a lot of money to develop something new. That seems to have changed, possibly, with the Chinese company DeepSeek that came up with its open source language model. Do you think that is a revolution to the market?
I think it's a leap for the market, and maybe not a revolution. Somebody called it the Toyota moment and not the Sputnik moment. And that's interesting because Toyota didn't invent cars. They figured out how to make them more reliably, safely, and cheaper than, at the time, the Americans. And that kind of competition in terms of making stuff better quality and more affordable, and the idea that innovation can come from anywhere in the world, that's positive.
Right, and do you think that open source is the way to go as well?
Well, if you know Mozilla, that made a famous open source browser, Firefox, we absolutely think that open source is the way to go. And I think, and things like DeepSeek or even Meta's Llama aren't really open source. There's a piece of it, but the whole stack needs to be open source, where everybody can see inside. And that's partly good for safety, but it's also good for smaller economies and smaller companies, because open source is an accelerant. If I'm Germany, Canada, the UK, open source is something that helped my economy leapfrog to catch up and be a part of the kind of growing AI economy.
Is it really more more secure though? I mean, talking about internet browsers, of course, but when you talk about AI, where there are threats to privacy, maybe also them developing their own conscience one day, is open source the way to go?
We've seen from the last 20, 30 years of the internet and technology that hiding things is actually not the way to security. We've had scams, we've had hacking. The same kind of things are the things that are going to happen again. And what has worked in the past is the whole community, like let's say Linux, every bank, every government, every business runs on top of Linux. And it is secure because they all have to make it secure. If one of them finds a flaw, everybody pitches in really fast to fix it. And so for AI systems, the idea that we have a common infrastructure, not every element of the system, but that the core infrastructure is there in common, we all have the same building blocks, then it means we're all going to move fast to fix them.
Well, the argument would obviously be that if it weren't open source, then only a number of actors, players would have access to these tools, and then it would be for governments possibly easier to control.
Well, I think there's two things in that. One is a few actors controlling these systems just has never worked in cybersecurity. People hack into systems all the time. And in fact, we see more resilience in open source because more people rely on the systems, more people have an incentive to fix them. And then, I think the other piece is that governments regulating this stuff works at the broad ecosystem level, but it works slowly. It doesn't work as the best way to solve a safety threat. You want something that is adaptive, that's fast, and that's what open source is.
Right. Well, talking about the threats of AI, there's obviously artificial general intelligence, AGI, that many people are afraid of. That is systems that surpass human capacity, our cognitive capacity. What's your take on that? Is that actually still trustworthy, that kind of system?
Well, we get to choose. I mean, I find the phrase AGI a little weird because it's not going to become human. It may have really powerful capabilities, even ones that we don't have. And the reason to work out what is trustworthy now to solve things like child sexual abuse material being inside of our AI models or hate speech, solving those problems we have today is what's going to build the muscle to solve them in even more powerful AI systems. So really, my answer for trustworthiness in the future is let's build trustworthy AI today, figure out as a society, as businesses, as governments, how to do it. So as these systems get powerful, we're good at that.
So for you, there's zero chance that we might at one point be in that scenario of, you might remember these Terminator movies in the 1980s where autonomous machines took over the world and basically try to kill all humanity.
I think in the end, the real risk is people using machines against people. And we're really talking about who's got power, do we distribute the power, and are we building defensive systems to balance that power? And so if we focus now on not leaving the power just in a few hands, if we focus now on defensive systems for all of us, whatever happens, I think we're going to be better prepared.
Okay. Can we go back to the Chinese DeepSeek system? Some analysts have been saying that there is what they call signs of AI liftoff. So specifically AIs training AIs, which could then be, the next step at one point could be AGI, even if you don't like the term. Would you agree with that assessment that there are signs of AI liftoff in that system?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is more synthetic data and using AIs to train AIs. Absolutely, that's one of the things that is driving down the cost. I think it's still something under human control. And so, really we're seeing this in, say, the growth of co-pilots, where we're talking about, people often talk about replacing programmers because, you can use these co-pilots that do the coding for you. Really what that is making it possible to be creative much more effectively, much faster. And so I think that's what we're seeing is a set of researchers who are using these co-pilots, using synthetic data to lower the cost. We're not seeing AI running on its own.
Well, one other aspect of AI is that a tendency that, because you were just saying, you can be innovative actually and presume more quickly, but could that also mean that we as human beings lose our capacity, for example, to write texts or to come up with funky ideas in the future because the machines are going to do it for us?
That is a really good question. And it's something I'm really worried about. We kind of become lazy or uncreative. And I think that is on us to figure out how do we learn with these machines to use them creatively and not to just kind of sit back and let them do everything for us. But there's a chance if we do that, our creativity really unlocks more. That's what we should be going after. And I would say that's a missing gap in the conversation.
Do you think that governments need to do something, to nurture that skill, or to keep telling people, you need to think yourself,
Well, I don't know if governments are going to be the people who tell people to do it and that'll be motivational. We all need to do that. Somebody needs to say it. We're talking about it here. So I do think, play with this stuff, be creative with this stuff, use it as, a kind of a paintbrush, a way to brainstorm, a way to kind of express yourself. And, in many ways, the early internet, the spirit of the early internet with people blogging was that, right? There was just a new way to talk. And this is a new way to talk, a new way to create, a new way to build things. And so I would just say people should do that.
You've been mentioning that you are a promoter of open source systems, but is there still an incentive for investors to invest?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you have huge companies built on open source. Meta, Google, Amazon. Open source is the fundamental underlying infrastructure of the internet today. It represents the last era of open source, $8 trillion of value. And that's why people use it to build their businesses on, including those huge companies. And there's money being made in creating the open source and offering services around it, and there's money being made using open source to accelerate these businesses forward. We hope that's going to be the same thing in the AI era.
One of the main topics here at this summit in Paris are safeguards, to keep AI safe in the future. You, as someone who knows the business, who knows the sector, in your foundation, what are you very concretely doing to protect, for example, the privacy of people, or to make sure that your systems don't go rogue or don't cause harm?
Well, I would just point to two things. One, as we integrate AI into Firefox, we're doing so very carefully and with a really strong focus on privacy and local AI. So AI that's just running on your phone, your laptop, much like Apple is doing with Apple Intelligence, trying to optimize for privacy. And you don't see very many other players in the industry doing that. And we think that's actually a really important niche and area to invest. So we are. And then we just, we're a small partner in launching something here called Roost, which is this new organization for online safety tooling. So basically, you're training an AI model or running a social network, all the systems that, say, Meta uses to make sure that things are safe, startups don't have this. And this is an organization creating open source tooling that is world class, so that if I'm Blue Sky or Discord or the next social network, I don't have to start from zero, but I'll have that online safety tooling, AI safety tooling, right out of the box, right out of the gate, and for a low cost as open source.
And just finally, as someone who comes from the sector, how important are events like this one here in Paris today and tomorrow?
It's a weird thing, a summit like this, and this is just the second one. It kind of feels like we're just trying on a suit that is not quite fitting yet, but this is technology that is going to change our societies, our economies, even more than the internet did. And we need a place to talk. We need a place to have a global conversation. We've really had very strange bedfellows having conversations here from countries you don't think are talking to each other, companies and countries that are talking to each other in ways you wouldn't expect. It is really positive. So we need a forum for this as we figure out how to metabolize and shape and control AI for the good of humanity.
And is there one or two specific takeaways for you from the summit, what you heard today?
I guess my biggest takeaway is exactly that. We're still in the awkward adolescent phase of this conversation. People are asking the right questions. I think there's a good balance between safety and innovation in a way that maybe there wasn't in the first summit, but we've got a ways to go.
Well, thank you so much. Mark Surman, you're the president of the US-based Mozilla Foundation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.